Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Since 2023, Nasrallah, also known as the Houthis, have attacked international commercial vessels and U.S. service members in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, while sparing Chinese-flagged ships. Houthi attacks have severely harmed economies the world over and contributed to global inflation by forcing cargo ships to take a more circuitous and expensive route around Africa. The State Department has designated the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization, which identifies them as a threat to U.S. interests, including our personnel in the Middle East, the safety of our closest regional partners, and the stability of global maritime trade. This designation demonstrates America's ironclad commitment to eliminate the Houthis' capabilities and operations and end their attacks in the Red Sea.
Piracy on the high seas. America's been here before, folks. Welcome back to More War Monday here on the Rob Maness Show. And we're live on Worldview Tube, X Spaces Simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, Roku, and now Apple TV, folks. Apple TV. Well, Payment in Iron. That's the title of the only United States Navy art that hangs in my Air Force office here in my retirement location. It depicts the USS Constitution leading the American response on pirates in payment for their attacks on U.S. shipping in Africa during the Jefferson administration. That's how far back this goes. The United States has always defended ourselves at sea, and our Navy continues that tradition today as it attacks the Houthi pirates in Yemen for their disruption of international shipping lanes and attacks on our forces, by the way. Thanks to the Trump administration, you just saw in their Department of State video that was released on March 10th, before this current operation started. The Houthis are once again designated as a foreign terrorist organization. And this follows their hundreds of attacks against commercial vessels in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. Note, they don't attack Chinese shipping, but have conducted over 300 attacks against the United States Navy and other commercial ships. Wow. A lot of questions remain unanswered, however. Iran has been providing targeting intelligence and command and control ships for the Houthi anti-shipping operation. Are we going to stop them now? Will we continue to spread our Navy thin in the Indo-Pacific, or will we eventually choose to use civilian contractors to take the Houthis down, as is authorized in the Constitution, by the way? Strategically, can we address our weak shipbuilding capabilities and get back on track to overtake our main adversary's capability that is hundreds of times more productive than ours and our allies combined? Well, Captain John Conrad is my guest today to talk about these issues. He's the founder and CEO of G-Captain Maritime News and author of the book Fire on the Horizon. He's licensed to captain the world's largest ships and has sailed from ports around the world. John has built some of the world's most advanced ships and managed billion-dollar offshore construction projects in some of the world's harshest marine environments. John, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, Colonel.
I appreciate your time, man. I know you're really busy. I have to ask, though, right out of the gate, why aren't they attacking the Chinese shipping?
Well, you know, they have linked all of these drones. They're using anti-ship ballistic missiles. They're throwing everything they can at these commercial ships and our Navy ships. China is sitting there watching them perform. China has a base in Djibouti. It's right across from our naval base in Djibouti at the mouth of the Red Sea. China now has a fleet larger than the U.S. Navy. So there are two aspects of this. One is China wants this to continue because it is getting intelligence on what our capabilities, our warship capabilities, and potential weaknesses. They have Chinese destroyers there. They have electronic equipment in Djibouti watching every mistake that we make, so that if there is a war in the South China Sea, they know our vulnerabilities. But number two, more importantly, is we know that the Houthis are getting the money and these missiles and drones from Iran. Where is Iran getting the money and the expertise? We know that Iran's primary funding source is China. And we suspect that a lot of this drone electronics and expertise is coming from China. So China benefits from this. China also benefits from the segmentation of world trade. If you can divide the world into regions by closing off choke points, it does strange things to pricing equality. And so, China likely told Iran, who told the Houthis, lay off our ships.
Yeah, and they are. It's so open, Well, you've sailed these waters. Your colleagues know these areas like the back of your hands, especially the choke points. Do you think that the U.S. operation, even this one, that's much more muscular than we've seen the last 4 years from the feckless Biden administration, you think it's going to reestablish any deterrence on the Houthis against shipping in these international waters?
I hope so. And I hope that primarily what we do is we prioritize U.S. flagships. I'm a U.S. Merchant Marine captain. We are the forgotten service. But going back to the Constitution, the U.S. Merchant Marine predates the Navy. The Navy's number one responsibility from revolutionary days is to protect U.S. flag ships and the trade that is on them. Every single president in history has prioritized U.S. Merchant Marine. And this goes back to the Captain Phillips. If you remember, the Somali pirates attacked dozens of ships. No one did anything. Then they land on the Maersk, Alabama, U.S. flagship, and Obama sent the SEAL teams in on parachutes to go and take it back and get back our captain. This has been a fundamental core of American national security. And guess what? We only have 82 ships in international service, so it shouldn't be very hard to protect. But Biden, for the first presidents ever, he said, we're not protecting U.S. flagships first. We are protecting all ships, including Russian and Chinese ships. And it was that attempt to try to protect everything instead of ours first and those of our allies that first had ripped apart the coalition. France said, we're not doing this. We're protecting our ships first, and broke apart from Operation Prosperity Guardian, started their own European Operation Aspides with the Italians and the Greeks. That's one thing it did. And then the second it did, it left our merchant mariners under Pete Buttigieg, who is our service secretary, unprotected for the first time in U.S. history, just abandoned by our government within missile range for weeks.
Wow. I wasn't aware of that, that move by the Europeans and by Biden had left our merchant marines completely exposed. Now, John, back in World War II, merchant marine ships had defenses on them. Do they have anything today to defend themselves with besides small arms?
Yeah, merchant marines have always had defenses. In World War II, it was naval gunnery. You had naval detachments come on, and then after that, it was given to the Army and then to the National Guard. So my wife is a veteran of the Iraq War. She brought a container ship through the Suez, Red Sea, into the minefields off Iraq. They had the Puerto Rican National Guard set up with communications equipment, set up with 50 calibers on deck, set up, with tactical air support for the fighter jets overhead. The Army has pulled back from this role. We saw with the Gaza Pier plan, the Army used to have a larger Navy than the Navy. Army's responsible for a Corps of Engineers, all the rivers and bridges. We forgot that when the Baltimore Bridge collapsed, they didn't have the equipment to do the salvage. The Merchant Marine had to do that. We saw that with the failure of the Gaza Pier, which led to the death of 3 Americans. And we saw that in the Red Sea. The Biden administration, even though it's precedent that you bring military units on U.S. Merchant Marine ships in combat zones, Biden and Secretary Pete Buttigieg specifically, because he's in charge of Merchant Marine, said, no, we're not doing this. And worse than that, while these, merchant mariners were stuck there in missile range at anchor, Pete Buttigieg didn't once do a message to the family, say, hey, your loved ones are safe or not safe or anything. He just completely pretended that he had no responsibility in that and the Gaza Pier, which I said most people don't realize 3 Americans died because of that Gaza Pier debacle, which Pete and Lloyd Austin were the primary cabinet secretaries on.
Yeah, people forget in our country too quickly, don't they? I'm sure they've forgotten that folks like you and I were saying this is not a good idea. When you look at the surf in that part of the world, that system just wasn't designed to be able to do that. And I think that's why those people died, was because of that. And the president made a really, really poor decision. So how much of the Suez Canal and the Red Sea and the choke point there and everything, how much U.S. shipping is actually, before this all started, was going through there, and how much is going through there today as compared to other countries like the Chinese, for instance?
Well, unfortunately, we just got a leak from the signal chat group of the cabinet secretaries who were talking about this, and it looks like Mike Waltz accidentally brought in a Atlantic journalist into this group, but J.D. Vance, if these messages are correct, correctly states that only about 3% of the trade going through ends up in the United States. It's about 30% in Europe. And in this group, they talk about, Pete Hegseth says he is very frustrated in the fact that this is a European problem. We're tired of bailing out Europe on this. But the sad fact is that Europe has under prioritized defense. They've given no money to defense. And if you think that their armies are bad, they've seriously underfunded the Navy. So they could only send 3 warships at a time. The Europeans, because it's 30% of trade, and this causes global inflation, they've wanted to solve this, but they can only send 3 warships at a time, and not one of the warships is as capable as an Ollie Burke destroyer. So they completely failed.
Wow. That's amazing that they've let their navies go so far down, even with the Europe. I get some humorous entertainment from watching you tweet about the Canadian Navy, for instance. But it's one thing for the Canadians to be letting their stuff go to hell, but for the Europeans, these nations like the French and the Spanish and the United Kingdom, they were empires based on their Navy fleets at one time, and it just goes to show you that we're right to insist that they put more funding into their defenses, even beyond NATO.
Yeah, I can't take up the opportunity not to harass Canada a little bit, because this is a critical point. Trump wants this golden dome for the ballistic missiles that could come hypersonic from China. Well, that's going to come over Canada, but what they don't realize, we can lend those systems, Patriot missiles or whatever the new one is, to the land, but you also need destroyers. And the Great Circle route from China goes over the Eastern Pacific. So you need Canadian destroyers there, one. Second, if we have a problem in the South China Sea, our destroyers will surge to Hawaii and Guam. Who's protecting the homeland? We need the Canadian Navy, but they only have 3 rusted subs and 0 destroyers. And the NATO navies are not much better. UK has the best navy. They have 2 aircraft carriers, but they're conventional carriers, and they don't have enough destroyers to protect it. So for them to get underway, they need our logistical support and our destroyers. French have 1 nuclear carrier, but it's just 1. And then it goes down from there.
Wow. Well, we got to take a break, John. When we come back, I want to talk about robbing the Indo-Pacific of naval power to move it over to the Middle East, and whether that's a wise idea or not, as we continue this discussion with Captain John Conrad, merchant marine captain and founder and editor of the G Captain. You should go check that out. It's the world's most famous maritime news site and very, very popular. I'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
President Trump ordered decisive military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. These Houthi terrorists have engaged in piracy, violence, and terrorism against American ships for years under the Biden administration, costing billions of dollars and putting innocent lives at risk. Joe Biden's pathetic weakness invited these unacceptable attacks. But there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Donald Trump. And the world is officially on notice. America has a commander-in-chief whose peace-through-strength approach is unwavering and should not be tested. As the president said, no terrorist force will stop American commercial and naval vessels from freely sailing throughout the world. Houthi terrorists and their Iranian backers should not cross President Trump again, and the president has made that clear.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and unfortunately, we have more war to talk about. My guest today is U.S. Merchant Marine Captain John Conrad. John, reporting has it that we're moving our carrier battle group from the Indo-Pacific over to the Middle East now as things ramp up or continue to ramp up from the beginning of this operation. I believe it was last Monday when the American operation started against the Houthis' capability on land to prevent them from firing at shipping and everything. A couple of questions have come to my mind about that. Is that wise? I mean, you know the fleet as well as anybody I know, both on the Merchant Marine side and the U.S. Navy fleet. That doesn't seem to be a wise move from my perspective, but I'm just an air guy, so.
No, it's not a wise move at all. And let me rewind a little bit. First, you have these anti-air missiles. Some of them, cost millions of dollars each, firing against these Houthi drones because they want to get the drones further out. So what they do is they don't wait for it to get within CIWS, close-in weapon system range, or the 5-inch gun, which has air defense capabilities. They're shooting these expensive standard missiles at $20,000 Houthi drones. We've already expended billions of dollars of these missiles, and each destroyer has a limited number of them, and we haven't figured out how to reload them at sea. So the destroyer only carries 96 missiles, and then it's got to go all the way to Bahrain and reloaded with a crane. Ukraine, instead of doing it at sea, which the Norwegians do in the North Sea on oil rigs all the time. So, and then you go into the Tomahawk missile, the TLAM category. We have a serious shortage of these Tomahawk missiles, and we're launching them all day against the Houthis. Biden did, and now Trump did, and now you get up the chain to the destroyers. Well, we have 72 destroyers. They're the best destroyers in the world, but 1/3 of those destroyers is constantly in maintenance in dry docks. It takes a long time to knock the rust off and refurbish equipment. 1/3 is getting ready for their next deployment or coming off deployment. So you only have 1/3 of the 72 destroyers that are deployable. And the Pacific Ocean is massive. People do not understand the absolute size. It's the largest ocean by far. 1/3 of 72 is not enough. And then you get to our carriers. Well, each carrier needs a screen of destroyers. We don't have any frigates and we don't have any cruisers anymore, or we're getting rid of the last of the cruisers. So they have to soak up destroyers. And we only have, we have 11 carriers, I believe. Only 9 are operational right now and 4 are deployed. This isn't enough. We have 2 in the Pacific, and we're getting Nimitz. We're cutting short its maintenance period, and it's deploying to cover carrier in the Pacific, so one of those carriers can go to the Red Sea. And if you take a look at a picture of this Nimitz, we're kicking it out of shipyard while it still has rust all down the side. And this is a big problem with our Navy. We're decreasing the maintenance period as we increase these deployments because we just don't have enough warships. And this leads a complete gap of carriers. We could be using them in the Mediterranean to watch the Russians. There's all this cable cutting by the Russians and the Chinese in the Baltic. No carriers up there. We have these operations against the cartel. We just sent 2 destroyers. We could use a carrier down in Central and South America, but we just don't have it. And this Houthi instance is now, it already has the Truman locked up there, and it's probably going to take another carrier from the Pacific, away from the Pacific, and take our eye off China. Finally, I'll say China loves this. They're not only getting this telemetry and our weapons weaknesses by watching all this, but they love that we're expanding our TLAMs, our standard missiles, and ramping down the maintenance period of our ships in order to surge against the Houthis.
Now, has our support of Ukraine, is that having an impact on this capability too?
Absolutely. First thing with the Ukraine is we decided the Black Sea is a NATO lake. You have Romania, you have Turkey. The majority, over 50% of the shoreline in the Black Sea is NATO, and the Biden administration under Admiral Gilday, they refused to enter the Black Sea. And people say the Montreux Convention with Turkey prevents us from going in. Well, the United States never signed the Montreux Convention, and we can talk about, there was a lot of call to send the hospital ships to help the Ukrainians early in. So the Navy completely backed out of the Black Sea, and we basically handed it over to Russia. So we don't have a presence there. And we are using all of these missiles and expertise in the Black Sea. A lot of our best intelligence analysts for the Navy are helping the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainian doesn't have a Navy. And European Command is very focused on Army-centric. They're not using the Air Force very smartly. They're not using the Navy very smartly. And you're running into all sorts of problems.
Yeah, I would think that we would be heavily patrolling the waters between Finland and Norway and the Baltic states and Norway and Germany and Norway, where those cables have been cut repeatedly now, but we're not. I mean, the NATO navies aren't capable of it either, are they?
No, they and that goes back. I keep putting Canadian Navy in quote and some of these other ones in quotes because Are they a Navy or are they a Coast Guard? I talked with a member of the new Secretary of the Navy's team when I was in Washington, and he said one thing that he wants to cut out immediately is sending all of these admirals over to Europe. He said, a rear admiral in the Navy commands a number of ships, where a vice admiral of the Danish Navy, what does the Danish Navy have? I think four broken frigates. Is that even really this individual said our commander is equivalent in the number of ships he commands to a vice admiral. So why are we sending admirals over to negotiate with these people? We should either cut tail and give up and refocus on China, or send a lower level officer and have them negotiate for us. Because, a lot of these navies call themselves Navy. They get a big seat at the big boy table. They're in all these NATO planning groups, and a vice admiral for the Danish or Netherlands Navy has a disproportional say to the amount of men and equipment they're sending into the fight, and it's not fair.
Yeah, I've made it no secret that I'm a graduate of the U.S. Navy War College, and I was in the
U.S. Navy woke college now.
Well, this was in the mid-2000s, so I graduated in 2007.
Better then.
So it was better then. But I was in what they call the International Command College, which is unlike the other services. They take all their international students and put them through a course, and they sprinkle 4 or 5 Americans from each service with them, and then we travel around and essentially do our classes on the road a lot. But I was amazed at the small navies that were, these guys are all and gals are all treated as though they understand a organization that's capable of fielding a United States Navy or even the French Navy and the UK navies. I mean, they were still pretty powerful back then too. But you had all these other countries with their sailors and their officers in this class that were going to be admirals, and many of my classmates have gone on to be the chiefs of their navies, and they may have a couple of frigates, like you said. So it's very interesting to see that play out. John, before we go to the next segment, I got to ask you this, and we can carry this over and you mentioned how vast the Pacific Ocean is. And I've flown from a place called Diego Garcia up into the Middle East and Southwest Asia on a regular basis. And flown across the Pacific in bombers from the United States all the way to Diego Garcia many, many times. I have a really good understanding of it, but most Americans do not. And I'm beginning to wonder, and I want to ask you this before we go to the break, is do most of the United States Navy's leaders understand just what the size of the problem is to just deter the People's Republic of China?
They understand that, but it's particularly a logistics problem. We know logistics wins wars, and the problem is we have the best destroyers, we have the best bomber crews around. But how are they going to get there? I get very frustrated with the Air Force leadership. It's like, well, we can do in mid-air refueling. It's like, okay, but how is that forward air base in Diego Garcia or Guam or Midway Island? How are they getting their fuel? How are we getting the ammunition there? You need these logistical ships, and they're going to take weeks to cross the Pacific. We've cut this ready reserve fleet of merchant ships that are sitting there waiting, by 2/3. And this ready reserve fleet, the last time we tested it was under Trump 1.0 in 2019. They're supposed to have an 85% success rate, being able to get out in port and load equipment. The last test we did in 2018, 40% success rate. We could only get 40% of the ships out. So we can have the best destroyers, best bomber pilots, best everything. If we're not getting that fuel out to the forward air and naval bases and the munitions, these weapon reloads, it doesn't matter how good we are. Logistics wins or loses wars.
Certainly does. I mean, we know that. We know that. We knew that from the very beginning, before the United States was the United States. Logistics is what won the Revolutionary War. And every war afterwards, it's in our dominance has been in the area of logistics at sea, and then later on in the air. And I want to talk some more about the ships and fuel delivery and why it's important for Air Force generals to have a solid knowledge of what's needed, and they should be advocating for more every single time they go to the Capitol. We'll be right back with Captain John Conrad, a fascinating discussion of the maritime issues associated with all of these areas of the world where the United States needs to dominate, and we're not. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at WVWFoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at WVWFoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at WVWFoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Well, we've taken out key Houthi leadership, including their head missileer. We've hit their headquarters. We've hit communications nodes, weapons factories, and even some of their over-the-water drone production facilities. Just in the last couple of days, President Trump has decided to hit the Houthis and hit them hard, as opposed to in the last administration where literally weeks or months would go by with these kind of one-off pinprick attacks. And as a result, we've had one of the world's most critical sea lanes get shut down. I mean, these guys are like Al-Qaeda or ISIS with advanced cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and some of the most sophisticated air defenses, all provided by Iran. So everybody understands the impact here. The last time one of our destroyers went through the straits there, it was attacked 23 times. 75% of our U.S. flagged shipping now has to go around the southern coast of Africa rather than going through the Suez Canal. And keeping the sea lanes open, keeping trade and commerce open is a fundamental aspect of our national security. The last administration was not effective. The Trump administration and President Trump have decided to do something much harder, much tougher, and what we'll see, but I think will be much more effective.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and my guest today is Captain John Conrad, who's also the operator of GCaptain, which is the merchant marine news site that's the most popular in the world, really, from what I could see. And you should go sign up for that if you want to know the realities of what needs to be done for the United States to reestablish, what are those words? Peace through strength, which President Trump ran on successfully, so that we get out of the endless war policies and move towards peace, while our enemies are deterred from doing the kind of things the Houthis and the Iranians are doing in the Red Sea and the choke point right there. John, I wanted to show that little clip because it's just chilling to hear Walt say a destroyer was attacked 23 times, going just traveling once through that space. It's just very critically important that this is a core mission of the United States Armed Forces, is to maintain freedom of navigation in international waters, not only for our forces, but for our commercial fleet. I mean, this is more about commercial fleets, really, at this point, since we're not in a world war right now, than it is about anything else. And it's a traditional mission. And I just want to say, before I come back to you, John, is that there are a lot of folks out there saying, well, we're going to get into another endless war. That is not what this mission is all about. It is about doing this job, stopping them from attacking international shipping, putting this back in the box, and preventing them from being resupplied again. But it's critically important, John. And we were talking about the logistics of all of this before we went to the break, and I don't have a clip of this, but it brought to my mind as I was prepping for this. We need to have a discussion about the oil tanker, the U.S. flagged oil tanker that was hit off of the eastern coast of Scotland at anchor by another ship, and the nuances about what that means, but also about what that oil tanker really is, because you mentioned nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, but they have to have diesel and jet fuel, don't they?
Absolutely. And getting back to that point, I realized I didn't answer your question last time. Do the admirals realize this? Well, we do extensive wargamings at the Navy War College and they always just write off the logistics. They do the battle and they say, assume you'll have this amount. And we can't make those assumptions anymore. It's about fuel and weapons. We saw this in the Vietnam War. The shipping container had been around 100 years, but ships did not use. They unloaded everything manually until the Vietnam War. And what was happening was all these ships were port congestion. If you remember during COVID, all the ships trying to get in at once were at anchor. Well, same thing happened in Saigon. All these Liberty ships, hundreds of them that we reactivated from World War II were stuck in harbor and they couldn't unload. And the Marine Corps looked at this and what is this cargo? Most of the cargo was fuel and bombs for the Air Force. And the Marines said, this is ridiculous. We can't get our own small weapons arms through. So that's when they built the world's biggest container ports at Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam and in Oakland. And it was this scale, it was a bigger project than the building of the Pentagon, or I think it was bigger than the B-29 project, building these. And once the world saw that you can move thousands of containers at once, every shipping line in the next 10 years transitioned from break bulk, this manual unloading, to containers. It's enormously powerful, but they don't realize it's primarily the Air Force and then the Army. It just takes an enormous amount of supplies, and the most critical supply is fuel. We only have 10 ships in our tanker security program. So there are over 50,000 merchant ships in the world. There are about 7,500 to 10,000 tankers. We only have 10 of those tankers in the United States in this tanker security program under the Department of Transportation. And somehow 1 out of our 10 is at anchor off the UK. They were delivering fuel for the Air Force missions out of the UK. And this container ship went down 16 knots through fog. It was a Russian captain in charge, and T-Bone ran right into the side of this ship. One of only 10 in the world, Rob.
That's amazing. 10, folks. Let me just reiterate that. We have 10. How many do we really need, John?
Well, I want to say we have a multiple of that in the United States and Jones Act trade, but in a war economy, you're going to need more. We can't take the ships that we're already supplying, like the Northeast, away for war, so this 10 is an international trade. Steve Carmel, the former vice president of Maersk, said that in order for a war in the Indo-Pacific, the Maersk calculates that we need at least 100 tankers overseas. And that was before Red Hill. The largest fuel storage facility in the world, underground bunker, was in Hawaii. We built it during World War II because we realized with the invasion of Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor, if the Japanese did another wave and hit our fuel tanks, it would have set us back a year or two in VJ Day. So during war, when we had other priorities, they built this huge underground tank under the thing, the Biden administration got these contractors in, and they replaced the steel tubes in these tanks with Home Depot PVC. A forklift backed in, and this fuel tank went and it went into the aquifer and poisoned children on base. So instead of fixing it, Biden says we're going to shut the entire underground fuel storage in Hawaii down. So we need 100 ships before Red Hill was closed in Hawaii. No one has done an updated study to say how many tankers do we need now that Hawaii's been taken out.
Wow. It's mind-boggling, and I'll be honest with you. The reason that I know, yes, I'm a War College graduate from the Navy War College, but the big reason I know what the logistics problem the problem set is that I operated from Diego Garcia, which is 10,000 miles from nowhere. And you get your gas and your bullets and your food and everything off of ships. Everything. So it's a massive problem set. And we go into this, say the Chinese mounted up on their amphibious docks that we saw, we've been seeing in the media several times over the last few years. The latest one was just a couple of weeks ago, and decide they're going to take Taiwan by force. There is no way that we have the capability beyond about a week or two to prevent that from happening, is there?
No, and China has approximately 5,500 merchant ships. We have 82 in international service. So, everyone says, well, we'll just bomb these merchant ships or the submarines. I hear, well, the submarines are great. We got the best submarines in the world. Well, how many torpedoes are on each submarine? And then you shoot 2 torpedoes per merchant ship. And, do we have 10,000 torpedoes forward deploy? Absolutely not. Do we have 10,000 bombs that we can release even if we have air superiority? Absolutely not. It's a numbers game. And the one thing that the Navy has done very well over the last 2 decades is they've reduced the size, but they've increased the capabilities. But when you only have, 72 destroyers, and a submarine can't defend a merchant ship against drones, the Navy has straight up said, we are not defending these tankers. And guess what? Yeah. They refused to put in close-in weapon systems. They refused to put on these Army detachments on these logistic ships. Even the Navy owned and operated one for Military Sea Lift Command. Once they break from the carrier group in the Red Sea right now, they have no defensive systems on board those oilers and tankers. So they're going to be very juicy targets for the Chinese to hit.
Sure are. Well, let's take a question from the audience. I got a couple of hands up over there. Shell's our hostess. Go ahead, Shell. Who's up?
Joseph, sir.
Thank you very much, Colonel. My question is, Trump just a month ago, they had a big thing about building a big shipbuilding port. That we were going to build these new massive giant ships, is what he said. How many of these ships do we need, like an entirely new type of fleet to be able to resupply? Or what is it that we would actually put from this type of a giant new shipyard?
Sometimes my audience gets way in front of me, John. My whole segment, the next segment, is dedicated to the shipbuilding office, and I want to get your thoughts on what's going on and what things need to look like. But that's a great question, isn't it?
It was broken up a little bit. Can you summarize the question for me, Rob?
Yeah, he was asking. That President Trump has talked about establishing the shipbuilding capability and reinvigorating our shipyards. Those kind of things. What is that supposed to look like? What kind of ship is he talking about? And how do we get that accomplished going forward? And we're going to take this discussion into the next segment. But go ahead. You can start it off, John.
Well, you have to start off with China. China has 350 times the shipbuilding capacity of us. So for every one ship we build, China builds 350. Now, these are commercial ships. Why is that a problem for the military? Well, 2 things. Chinese-built merchant ships are part of China's war plan. their merchant mariners have been given military training, and they build these ships to military specs, meaning they are very difficult to sink. Even that American tanker, when it got rammed 16 knots, a whole jet fuel tank exploded. It still didn't sink. So these Chinese ships are built to higher standards, and they're going to be used in the war. The other thing is, when they build commercial ships, they build the dry docks, the workforce, and then they can take those same dry docks and shift to building Navy ships. And that's what we really lost. We continue to build Navy ships in the U.S., but we have no surge capability because we have not been building commercial ships. So Trump wants to build both more Navy ships and more commercial ships so that we can cross-pollinate.
Yeah, we got to take our last break. When we come back, we will dive into exactly that. How do we achieve that? That's a question you and I've talked about before. We've been talking about it for years now. These folks like John Conrad and Sal Margulis and Commander Salamander that are experts in this have been doing it for 10 years or more. We've got to get this done, but the question is how? What does that look like, and who? We'll be right back with Captain John Conrad here on More War Monday on The Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now, and we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
To boost our defense industrial base, we are also going to resurrect the American shipbuilding industry, including commercial shipbuilding and military shipbuilding. And for that purpose, I am announcing tonight that we will create a new Office of Shipbuilding in the White House and offer special tax incentives to bring this industry home to America where it belongs. We used to make so many ships. We don't make them anymore very much, but we're going to make them very fast, very soon.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and I led this show off talking about Payment in Iron, the piece of U.S. Navy artwork that hangs in my office. I look at it during the show, as a matter of fact. It's right in front of me to remind me of the maritime nation that I am a member of, and a citizen of, and a member of the armed forces of, and to remind me of the logistics, even then, that it took to achieve that objective and win that mission and be victorious. My guest today is U.S. Merchant Marine Captain John Conrad, who's also a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, by the way. I forgot to mention that in my opening introduction, John. I have
to correct you there. I did not. Unfortunately, my dad got cancer from Agent Orange, so I transferred to the Merchant Marine Academy in New York. But I did attend the Naval Academy briefly until.
Thanks for correcting me. But you did go, right? You did go to the Academy.
Yes.
I thought you did. Needless to say, though, you are very approving, and so am I, and those of us that have been advocating for this shift and this prioritization on shipbuilding, and very appreciative of the Trump administration and President Trump for establishing this office in the White House, putting priority on this. We've talked about Mike Waltz's background as a congressman. He's the one of the folks that have published the maritime strategy that highlighted that let's put these numbers in perspective. America can build 5 merchant marine ships a year, and China can build over 1,700. That's the difference. And think about all the things that go into building a ship, the size of these things, the dry docks you mentioned, the workforce is a massive, massive capability that the United States just doesn't have. What are the steps in achieving this is one of the big questions I have for you, because there's a near term and then there's a midterm and a long term set of things that we have to do to get to the end state of building more ships than anybody else and doing it right here at home, which essentially is what the president said in his speech.
Well, it starts with awareness first, and we all have to give Mike Waltz just a debt of gratitude for highlighting this issue and, doing the initial work on the Ships for America Act, which is now hopefully will pass Congress soon and will provide that leap. Next, after you inform the public, we have something called sea blindness. We've just been so focused on these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that America has forgotten about the importance of the Navy. They've forgotten the Constitution, things like you say, it started off with, privateering, that you can have letters of marque. All of these things we learned and we've forgotten, and they're not taught in our schools anymore. So one is awareness. And then number 2, you need a national will, and you need all of these organizations working together. I'm a merchant marine captain. We're not anywhere in the White House, anywhere in the DOD. You won't find us at Department of State. We need these guys who have been on ships and understand trade in each of these departments. And this is the beauty of Trump. Everyone's trying to figure out now how we do this. But everyone I talked to in Washington, from state, Department of Transportation, Homeland Security, they've all understood. Trump has told them all that this is a national priority and they all have to work together. And then finally, it's a question of money. It takes money in order to build these shipyards and the workforce. Previous administrations have gone down the path of, the government, the DOD has to take this money out of their budget and spend it in shipyards. But we used to build ships like the battleships built in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. That was a government-owned shipyard. Now all of our ships are built by private companies with stocks and bonds on Wall Street. So Wall Street is funneling money to Chinese shipyards. We have to sever that money connection and redirect those funds into American yards.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've done is we've reduced the number of shipyards in America drastically. And you just mentioned the shipbuilders are private companies. I live in south on the coast in Mississippi, just down the road from Pascagoula, where Ingalls shipbuilding is. They built some great Navy ships there. Bollinger Shipyards is building Coast Guard ships, and then we've got a couple of small commercial ones. But how do we, as Americans, I get the question of what can I do? Well, how about starting a ship manufacturer, a shipbuilding company? What do you say to folks that do have capital that want to get that done? How is that possible even today to have an idea like that and see this opportunity? Because it's there, obviously. The president's made it the priority. The money's going to flow from a government perspective, but they're all private now. We need folks that understand this business, that have access to capital to come in and create new ship manufacturing capabilities, first on expanding shipyards and then building new ones, right?
Absolutely. And I talk to the Wall Street bankers all the time, and they are eager to invest in Pascagoula and, VT Halter, owned by Bollinger. And these are great yards. But take, for example, VT Halter had, it was bought by a Singaporean company. They have waterfront real estate, which is priceless. They put $400 million into investment there. They developed the workforce for the Coast Guard icebreakers. And then what happened? There were delays after delays after delays. All that equipment started to rust. To get away from those delays, the Singaporean company sold. They put and they had $9 billion in government contracts. They sold the whole yard for $16 million with an M because of the bureaucracy, the red tape. So what we need more than anything, that money will flow once DOJ comes in and cuts the red tape. I mean, you have OSHA, Navy OSHA, government OSHA. You have, you have environmental studies up the yin yang. They restrict the type of paint used, the type of application used, and then they do these change orders. The Ford class Carrier took 10 years to build. They did 16,000 change orders. This is a factory production. Can you imagine if Tesla every single day changed the door handle an inch this way, an inch that way, and every time the workforce had to learn all of these new changes? It's that red tape and bureaucracy. So we desperately need Elon Musk to come in there. And then you got the state and local. Go to crazy California, the San Diego yard. They have oilers right there that we finished that can't go because they can't get the firefighting foam on the things because California said that's going to cause cancer and you can't transit on their highways. So someone's got to put these states in line and cut all of this federal red tape and just let the yards build.
Yeah, so the tools are there, is what it sounds like to me, especially with this. The president's effectively laid in the keel of the new capability. Well, we got some questions over the audience. Let's take one before we get to the end of the show. John, go ahead, Shell.
We have Colonel Gannon Burton, sir.
Hey, Colonel Rob, it's good to hear from you, Captain John. Thanks. Great discussion here. One thing that's been on my head listening to this discussion is that, when we kind of grew up, Colonel Rob Maness, we had a clear national strategy prior to, the long war, right? We were supposed to build up to having the ability to conduct 2 major conflicts, and I think, or 3 regional wars. And I wonder if that's actually being readdressed now. And also, we lost Joint Forces Command, which seemed like a lot of overhead, but a lot of really smart people built that up to hold the military-industrial complex to actually being able to do what it's supposed to do, right? Hold the large exercises and then grade and hold accountability to our commanders of the fighting forces. So I'd like to ask you guys to talk about that for a second and where we're going on that. Is that being opened up again, or can we get back to the basics of the actual Defense Department creating the huge structure? Because it seems like the politicization of the military really started to go, ramp up after Joint Forces Command went up, and we kind of lost that overarching accountability that was being held. He was holding 3 and 4 stars accountable, right? Sorry, that might be too much, but that's what I was thinking.
I think accountability is the key, right, John?
Absolutely. You have this NAVSEA, the Navy shipbuilding and repair arm of the Navy. They haven't delivered one ship on time and on budget this century. They did a couple submarines, no ships. They have 83,000 people. It's twice the size of the entire Coast Guard. Not one has been fired for any of this accountability. And I love what you say about strategy. The last time that we have had a maritime strategy in this country was Nixon. And unfortunately, that got thrown in the trash after Watergate. Reagan was a big shipbuilder. He was big on the Navy, but he wanted to outsource and left industrial policy in the commercial merchant marine and let it be outsourced overseas. So, yes, unless we all get on the same page and understand the true jointness. Like I said previously, you go to even the shipbuilding office at the White House today that Waltz has done. It's got 2 Navy guys. It's got an Air Force guy. We need a merchant marine guy. We need the logistics people at the table. And everyone else has to be accountable. These war games have to be realistic with logistics. And they have to be a cross department that everyone's working on the same strategy. And we still don't have a good logistics and maritime strategy anywhere in government.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. And that's why I've called for a Louisiana Maneuver style war exercise in the Pacific literally, not figuratively, but literally exercising everything we have from a logistics perspective and having the actual commanders make the decisions with the actual forces that they're going to use. But we got to get away from all this other distractions that are unnecessary other than what we need to do before we can get prioritized on that. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Folks, John Conrad's on X. And again, go to GCaptain, and you can find his publication. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us, John. Tomorrow, I'm going to have retired Master Chief Petty Officer, another Navy day, Paul Abney, who is going to be here to talk about his experience on the USS Cole attack. That's right, the USS Cole, when it was almost sunk by a terrorist attack. It should be a fascinating discussion. I'll see you then on Training Tuesday.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.